Right now, under a green hill outside the Chinese city of Xi'an, there is a sealed door that nobody is allowed to open. Behind it lies the tomb of the first emperor of China, untouched for more than 2,000 years. We have drones. We have ground-penetrating radar. We have machines that read straight through solid rock. And still the people who guard this hill refuse to go in. Not because they can't, but because of what happened the last time China opened a sealed emperor's tomb. This is the one door they will not touch. And this is why. From the outside, the hill looks like nothing. A quiet mound covered in pomegranate trees, worn down by 20 centuries of rain, sitting in the farmland east of the old capital. People plowed those fields for centuries without knowing what they were standing on. Then, in 1974, a small group of farmers digging a well in that dry ground hit fragments of hard clay, and then a face. A life-sized soldier, staring back at them out of the dirt. They had no idea they had just uncovered one of the greatest archaeological finds in human history. That was the Terracotta Army. Somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 warriors, each one sculpted with a different face, standing in silent battle formation in the dark. The world came to see them, and millions of people file past those pits every year. But the soldiers were only ever the guards. The thing they were built to protect sits under that tree-covered hill, and no one alive has ever seen inside it. For most of recorded history, we had only one description of what waits in there, and it reads like a nightmare. A historian named Sima Qian wrote it down about a century after the emperor died. He described a buried palace with a ceiling full of stars, a floor shaped into the map of the whole empire, and rivers of liquid mercury, made to flow like the seas of China across the ground. For most of history, scholars treated that as a fairy tale, the fantasy of a dead ruler, written by a man who was born long after the tomb was sealed and never set foot inside it. Then science checked. Starting in 1983, Chinese researchers tested the soil sitting on top of the mound, and the readings came back wrong. The dirt above the chamber held mercury at dozens of times the natural level, in some places close to 1,500 parts per billion, where the surrounding land held around 30. A second survey years later found the same thing. And in 2020, a team of Swedish and Chinese physicists went further. They aimed a laser into the open air above the hill and measured what was rising off it. Mercury vapor, drifting up out of the soil at levels far above anything nearby. Their conclusion was quiet and chilling. The mercury is still leaking out, escaping through cracks that opened in the structure over the centuries, from a chamber that has never been opened. Some estimates put the amount of mercury sealed inside at around 100 tons, enough to pool into the rivers and seas the historian described, though nobody can measure the true quantity without breaking in. A 2,000-year-old legend, written by a man everyone doubted, and a modern laser just confirmed he was telling the truth. There is one more strange detail in those readings. The archaeologist who led the site for years, Duan Qingbo, noticed that the mercury is not spread evenly under the hill. It is heavy in some sectors and almost absent in others, and he argued that the pattern lines up, roughly, with where China's great rivers and seas would fall on a map. In other words, that the emperor really did build a liquid metal map of his empire down there, flowing under the earth. Not everyone agrees. Another archaeologist who worked the site thinks the chamber may have partly broken down over the centuries, spreading the mercury too far to trust it as a map of anything. And we cannot settle the argument, because settling it means opening the tomb, which no one will do. So if we can't go inside, how do we know anything at all? Because for the last few decades, Chinese teams have been reading the tomb from the outside, the way a doctor reads a body without cutting it open. In the early 2000s, A national science program mapped the hill with gravity meters, radar, and electrical sensors. What they found is almost harder to believe than the legend. The chamber has not collapsed. After more than 2 millennia, the ceiling still holds. Water has not flooded in, because the builders wrapped the tomb in a drainage system, a wall of packed clay that still works today, still steering groundwater around the chamber like a dam that nobody has touched since the Qin dynasty fell. Inside the mound, the sensors traced a stepped structure, a buried pyramid of rammed earth rising in terraces over the burial chamber. The chamber itself is roughly the size of a soccer field, sitting about 100 feet below the top of the hill. And somewhere in the middle of it, the readings picked up a dense concentration of metal. And the chamber is only the center of it. This whole place is not really a grave. It is a buried city, spread across an area of more than 20 square miles, ringed by an inner wall and an outer wall, with close to 200 separate pits found so far. Pits of soldiers, pits of bronze chariots, pits of acrobats and officials and stable hands. A full imperial court recreated underground for one man to keep ruling after death. The terracotta army is simply the corner of it we happen to dig into first. Sit with what that means. Everything the historian described could still be down there, sealed, intact, waiting in total darkness, exactly as it was the day they closed the door. Which brings us back to the people inside, because the emperor did not go into that tomb alone. The tomb of the first emperor was not built. It was inflicted. Sima Qian wrote that more than 700,000 workers were driven to this hill. Conscripts and prisoners marched in from across the newly conquered empire. The work dragged on for close to 40 years, longer than many people of that era even lived. And when it was finally done, he wrote something worse. To keep the location of the treasure secret, the craftsmen who built the inner tomb were sealed inside it. The middle gate was shut, the outer gate was dropped, and the men who knew what was in there never came back out. For a long time, that was only his word, a story we could not check. But the ground around the tomb has started to give up the proof, and it is uglier than the legend. Archaeologists digging the land around the mausoleum found mass graves. In one of them, studied in 2016, the skeletons had been thrown in without any care, and some of them were still wearing iron shackles around their legs. Chemical analysis of their bones showed these were not local men. They had come from the far south of China, from the very lands the emperor had crushed, marched hundreds of miles to build a tomb they would die beside. At another site, the workers were buried with small clay tags, and on those tags, someone had scratched their names, their rank, and the town they came from. These were real people, named, filed like inventory next to the hill that killed them. And it was not only workers. Near the burial itself, archaeologists uncovered a cluster of skeletons, most of them young men, believed to be the emperor's own sons. One skull still had a bronze crossbow bolt buried in it, fired from close range. Nearby, they found around 100 small tombs holding the bodies of young women, likely the emperor's childless concubines, some of them torn apart, their remains left scattered in the doorways. There is beauty down there, too. In one pit, they found a scene that is almost tender. 46 life-sized bronze birds, cranes and geese and swans, arranged along the banks of a man-made stream, with clay musicians kneeling to play for them forever. One of the bronze cranes has a small insect clamped in its beak, frozen at the exact instant it plucked it from the water 20 centuries ago. An entire garden of the dead, built so that even in death, the emperor would never be alone. So who was he, this man worth all these bodies? His name was Qin Shi Huang, and he took the throne of a single warring state as a 13-year-old boy, then spent his life conquering the others, until, for the first time in history, there was one China, with him alone at the top of it. He built roads, forced a single written language on every region, and raised the first version of the Great Wall. He also burned the books that disagreed with him, and by one account, buried scholars alive for the same crime. But the thing that truly ruled him, in the end, was fear. He was terrified of dying. He had reason to be. He survived at least 3 assassination attempts, and afterward he slept in a different room each night and moved through a network of covered walkways so that nobody could ever be sure exactly where he was. He forbade the people around him from even speaking the word in front of him, and he went hunting for a way out of it. He became fixated on a legend of islands in the Eastern Sea where a herb of eternal life was said to grow, and he funded an expedition, thousands of young men and women loaded onto ships and sent east to find it and carry it home. According to the old records, they sailed out and never came back. Some say they died at sea. Others tell a stranger story, that they reached new land somewhere and simply never returned. The elixir never arrived. So his court alchemists brewed their own instead, and the emperor drank whatever they handed him. Here is the terrible joke of it. Those immortality elixirs were made with mercury. Many historians now believe the medicine he swallowed to cheat death is the very thing that killed him, poisoning him slowly while he chased eternal life. He died at 49, on the road, far from his capital. Before we go further, one quick thing. If a story like this matters to you, the men in the chains as much as the emperor in the tomb, subscribing tells us to keep digging into it. And if you're watching this on your television right now, press and hold the select button on your remote and choose subscribe on the screen. A like does the same job in 1 second. Then stay with us, because what comes next is the part they tried to bury. And what happened right after he died is almost hard to believe. His death was hidden. A court eunuch and the emperor's chief minister kept the body in its carriage and pretended he was still alive, still issuing orders, because whoever controlled the succession controlled the empire. It was late summer, and the corpse began to rot. So to hide the smell on the long road home, they loaded a cart with salted fish and drove it alongside the dead emperor, masking the stench of the most powerful man in the world behind a wagon of rotting fish. By the time the truth came out, they had already forced his rightful heir to take his own life and put a puppet on the throne. Within 4 years, the dynasty he built to last 10,000 generations had collapsed completely. Which brings us back to the door. If the chamber is intact, if everything is still down there, if we can map it with our machines, then why, after all this time, will China not simply open it and look? The honest answer has nothing to do with curses or traps or the crossbows the old historians swore were waiting inside. It is about a disaster that already happened. In 1956, Chinese archaeologists opened a different sealed imperial tomb, the tomb of the Wanli Emperor of the Ming Dynasty. They got in. They found thousands of objects, rolls of silk, painted wood, the emperor and his 2 empresses lying where they had been placed. And then they watched it die in front of them. They had no way to preserve what they had just exposed. The silk turned brittle and black. The color drained out of everything the moment the air reached it. Things that had survived intact for centuries fell apart within a single season, because the people who dug them up were not ready for what came out of the ground. Years later, in the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, mobs dragged the bones of the emperor and his empresses out into a courtyard and burned them. In the rush, careful records of what had been found were never properly kept. The whole excavation became a national lesson in what happens when you open a door you cannot handle. And it is the single biggest reason China now refuses to dig into the resting places of its emperors at all. And that lesson has teeth here, because we know exactly how fast this tomb would be lost. When the terracotta warriors first came out of the ground, they were not gray. They were painted, covered in bright color. But after 2 millennia underground, that paint could not survive the dry air of Xi'an. A museum official who worked on them described it in a way that is hard to forget. The pigment began to curl within about 15 seconds of being exposed, and the paint flaked off the surface within roughly 4 minutes. 15 seconds. That is how long the color lasted. Whatever is painted inside that sealed chamber would begin to die almost the instant we broke through to it. So people ask the obvious question. If it is that fragile, why not send in a robot? Why not drill one small hole and look? And this is where the internet fills up with nonsense. You will find videos claiming that an explorer scanned the tomb and uncovered something monstrous hidden inside. That never happened. What actually happened is quieter. An explorer named Albert Lin was allowed to fly a drone over the mound and study the site using the Chinese team's data. And standing on that hill, he said the readings were consistent with rivers of liquid metal below. That is the real discovery. No monster, no secret creature, just Mercury, and a chamber no camera has ever entered. And no, the warriors themselves are not real bodies turned to clay, the way another rumor claims. They are hollow, fired ceramic, sculpted to look like the living men who guarded a living emperor. The truth is simpler and harder. A robot still needs a hole, and a hole still breaks the seal that has protected everything inside for 2,000 years. The mercury vapor makes the chamber dangerous to enter, and the technology to open that tomb, record everything, and keep it all from crumbling at the same time does not exist yet. An archaeologist who consulted on the warriors put it plainly: nobody has been in there, and nobody in the world right now has the technology to properly go in and excavate it. The best idea scientists have offered is to image the palace using cosmic rays, particles that rain down from space and pass straight through solid Earth, mapping the inside without ever cutting into it. But even that has only been proposed, not done. Because to actually reach the burial chamber, someone would have to cut down through a hill that is itself a protected national monument, break the very seal that has kept the outside air away for more than 20 centuries, and then stabilize everything inside before it meets the modern world and dies. The archaeologist who led the site said it about as directly as anyone can. There is no plan to open the chambers because there are no mature technologies and no effective way to protect what is in them. So they wait for something that does not exist yet, a future with tools careful enough to open that door without destroying what is behind it. There is one more claim worth settling, because you will hear it too. The story that the tomb was already robbed, that a warlord named Xiang Yu tore the complex apart a few years after the emperor died and burned it to the ground. And there is real fire damage and looting in the terracotta army pits, so something violent did happen above ground. But most experts believe the warlord never reached the sealed chamber itself. The mercury is the proof. If the tomb had been cracked open in the chaos right after his death, that poison would have vented and vanished long before our lasers ever found it rising off the hill. The seal held. Whatever went in, stayed in. So the door stays shut. The reason has nothing to do with fear of the dead. It is that we could so easily destroy what is behind it, and everyone who studies this place knows it. The first emperor spent the lives of hundreds of thousands of people to build himself a world that would last forever, sealed in the dark under a hill of trees. And for now, it has lasted. The mercury is still down there, still leaking its faint poison up through the soil. The palace is still standing. The man who feared death is still lying inside his bronze coffin, guarded by an army of clay, exactly where they left him, while we stand outside with our scanners, not daring to knock. Maybe one day we will have the tools to open it gently. Maybe it should never be opened at all. If you want to see another sealed chamber that a government refuses to let anyone enter, the story of the room hidden behind Tutankhamun's wall is on the screen right now.